Okay, now we've got a test shot set up here in a spare bedroom. It's a 3 meter by 3 meter bedroom. We've got the Sony a7S III set up on a tripod with the Sony 16 to 35 millimeter lens. For a wide shot like this, your aperture really doesn't matter. Have it somewhere between 5.6 and 11 and you'll be fine. As long as you focus the camera correctly, it's not going to make any difference once you're this wide. That aperture is only going to make any difference for you once you're actually zoomed quite in. So on this lens, as far as 35mm, if you went all the way down to 2.8, then it would make a difference, but this wide, it really doesn't. I've shot video on a 12mm lens all the way at 2.8 and everything's in focus. So the wider you are, the less difference that aperture makes. Okay, so let's take the shot. What we've got here is we're looking at the bed, and we've got all of the size of the room, and we've got the window view as well. So I've got the camera set up to take 5 brackets, ultimately, so a middle exposure, and then 2 that are brighter, and 2 that are darker. So my settings at the moment are 1/30th of a second, f7.1, and ISO 320. ISO is purely just to speed up my workflow a little bit through the day. You could do 100 if you want, you could do 800 if you want. It really doesn't matter. It's purely the sort of better camera you have, the higher you can go without getting noise, and it just speeds up your day a little bit. So we'll half press that shutter and press. Okay, and we've got our 5 shots. Now what I'm going to do for this bedroom is I'm going to move the camera across and get the other potential angle, which is over here looking towards the wardrobe, showing that that's there. You lose a little bit of the room on that side, but you gain a little bit on that side. So we'll take that shot as well. All right, now let's take a look at both of these on the computer and how I would blend these. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom. We've got all of those photos in. So we've got our 5 brackets for this first image. And what we've done is we've selected all of those, we've right-clicked, and we've gone photo merge, then hold shift, and then click HDR. That gives us this as an output. Now what I've done is I have just put my Real Good internal preset on there. Then what we're going to do is just bump up the exposure a little bit. I like to start with my base exposure, somewhere around that 3/4 setting in Lightroom. And then we're just going to get the white balance dropper and just click around a little bit on anything that's getting a good amount of natural light to try and set that white balance. Okay, now you can see when I was doing it up here on the roof where there's not a lot of light, it was getting really incorrect cool colors. But then as soon as I click on the wall here, where it's getting lots and lots of natural light, it immediately found the correct white balance. And that's spot on to how that room looks as well. Now, the other thing that I like to do while I'm still in Lightroom is just boost any saturation I might need to do, and that's pretty good. Now, one thing I will point out is none of these presets have any sharpening on them. I always like to do all of my sharpening in Photoshop, and that's where we're going to take these photos. What I will do, however, is right click and where is it? Develop settings, copy settings. So just check all of those, and then I'm going to go over to the other HDR photo that I took in the same room with the same exposure. I'm going to go right click, where have you gone? Develop settings, paste settings. And then you should find that should have the same white balance and essentially the same look as the other photo. Now, I'm going to command click both of those, right click, edit in Photoshop 2023. Okay, now that we've got the 2 of those photos saved into Photoshop, what I'm going to do is essentially run through and blend the windows in a little bit better and boost up some of this interior. What we're going to do is select the layer, and then we're going to select color range, And then we're going to click the dropper over here on the window somewhere like that. We want mostly the window selected, so we can just arrange the fuzziness or adjust the fuzziness rather until we get a good sort of selection, and we don't want too much of the room selected. So we still want to get that fence selected out there, so we're going to have to bring this up a little bit. Okay, somewhere around 93 looks pretty good for this example. What we're going to do now is click OK. We're going to go over here to the polygonal lasso tool and hit this one here, which is deselect. And essentially what we're going to do is select around the window, and what we're trying to do is deselect anything other than that window. There we go. So all we've got selected now is that window. So what we're going to do now is go select, modify, expand. We're going to expand that by 50 pixels. Then we're going to go select, modify, feather. We're going to feather that by 50 pixels. Filter, camera raw, and we're just going to bring down all of those highlights there. And then bring down the exposure a little until it looks more natural. And then the white balance is actually a little bit different outside, so we're just going to warm it up a touch. And that looks pretty good. I'm also going to bring in a little bit of dehaze, just to sort of bring a bit more color back in. There we go, that's looking pretty good to me. So hit OK. You've now got a reasonable HDR window pull. I'm now going to go select inverse, and then we'll go back to filter, camera raw. And what we're going to do here is essentially boost the exposure a little bit more. Just have a bit of a play with it. I want to bring the shadows up a little bit, drop the highlights down just a touch, but I also want to drop the blacks down because I don't want to lose all of my contrast by bringing up the shadows. That's all looking pretty good. Colors are pretty natural. What I might do just to make it a little bit more appealing is I'm just going to boost some of those blues in the carpet. There we go. Now that floor color is very accurate, so we'll leave that be. But there are some pretty easy ways in other tutorials that I've got on how to reduce any color cast. Essentially what you might want to do is go to this color mixer with saturation, click on this dropper, and then click anywhere that you've got some color cast, and then drag that down. You can see how that desaturated the walls really quickly, but didn't ruin the color of the floors or anything as well. So we'll take that back to about there. That's how it looked. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. Now, one thing that you might like to do, depending on your area and your style, is you might like to just whiten that ceiling back up. So we'll just select our ceiling there, go to filter, camera raw, and you're probably going to want to take out any sort of saturation from the ceiling, and then just the tiniest bit of extra exposure. Gives you a real bit of clarity there, showing that the ceiling is in fact white and the skirts are in fact white, whereas the wall is slightly off-white. Okay, so overall that looks pretty good. Now what we still need to do is sharpen it and potentially do a window replacement. So what I'm going to do is sharpen up the photo first. So we're going to go select, filter, sharpen, and we're going to go to unsharp mask. Essentially what unsharp mask does is it only sharpens things in the photo that are already sharp. So anything that isn't sharp, like a flat wall or anything like that, won't be sharpened. And you can go through with this, and I'll just go right up to the end to show you how it can be, and then all the way down. So that's how we are right now. I think that we would like to go somewhere around that sort of 150 mark. That should give us a good level of sharpening for a photo of this sort of resolution. And we'll click OK. Cool, that's looking pretty good. Now what we want to do is do our sky replacement for the window. Now there's a couple of different ways to do this. Sometimes the auto replacement on Photoshop will work quite well. So we'll try that. And no, it's not detecting the sky. So what we're going to want to do is make a selection. So we'll grab our quick select tool and we just want to select that sky. You see it's done a really good job there already. Select the plus and select the other little bit of sky. Now overall that's done a really good job. I'm not too concerned about losing these two things over here. So now we're going to go Command X and Command V. You can see that that's given us back our sky as a separate layer. We're going to put that back over there. I think that's aligned a little bit better. And we're going to change the opacity to 50%. Now go to File, Place Embedded, and we're going to search for our sky. Okay, so there's the sky that I'm going to work with. We'll resize that so that it fills the whole area. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this bottom layer above that. So you can see we've got a really nice sky replacement in the window now, but it's a little bit unnatural. We've lost that fly screen. So now we'll bring the other layer on top, and you can see that's a much more natural blend of the real sky, and we still get to see some of that fly screen in there as well. What you can do if you want the sky to be a little bit stronger is you can do one of two things. You can either drop the opacity on that layer, which like before it makes the sky look better, but it gets rid of some of that detail in the fly screen. So we'll leave that at 50%. What we're instead going to do is boost up all of the saturation and the exposure a little bit for our sky replacement, because a lot of this is going to sort of disappear blending with the other shot. And you can see now, even though that looked awful in the preview, that looks really quite good here. Now that is pretty much everything for this photo. You might go through and do some little touch-ups with the dodge tool. Oh, and of course we've got to straighten. So you might, this is all pretty good because it's a nice light room, but you might bring up some of the offside of the bed a little bit. Not enough to get rid of any of the shadows, but just to brighten it up a little bit. You can see my cat hiding under the bed. Okay, and that photo is done. Now essentially the process works the same for the other image. So we can really quickly go through and do the same thing to the other one. Camera raw filter, we want to boost up that exposure a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Color mixer, bring down the walls just a touch. Okay, that's looking pretty good. We'll do our ceiling while we're at it. Alrighty, camera roll. So as you can see, once you've done it a few times, it all becomes pretty quick. And we'll show you a different method on how to do the window pull for this one as well. You can just go through and select the windows like that so that you don't have the individual beams, and we'll go Command X, Command V, just so that we've got that as a separate layer, and then that means that we can edit the rest of the room around it. We will go Filter, Camera Raw, bring down the exposure, a bit more saturation, a bit of dehaze. There we go. Okay, that looked better without dropping the highlights too much. I will drop these shadows just for a bit of extra contrast, and we'll warm it up a little bit. Okay, so that's our HDR window pull for this one. We're going to grab the dodge tool, sort of bring up that exposure a little bit and some of the more shadowy areas. Now with this photo you can see we've got a lot of green cast over here on the wall, So let's get rid of that quickly. Filter, camera raw, color mixer, select there, and I'm just going to bring down those yellows and greens until we think that it's gone. Beautiful. Alright, that looks good. So we're going to go layer, flatten image. Let's do our window sky replacement again. Okay, now selecting the window pull on this side. It has selected this beam, so we want to get rid of that. Now, let us sharpen the image. Same setting as before, just to keep consistency. And the one thing we still need to do is straighten the image. So File, Camera Raw Filter. We're going to go down to Geometry. You can go Auto. That hasn't done a great job. We can go Vertical. That's done a much better job. Or you can also go Guided. Now I won't do guided for this one because this has done quite a good job with auto. So we'll click OK. And moving back to the other photo, there we go. So we'll go back, we'll flatten the image, and we will try again. So we'll go Filter, Camera Raw. When you're using the guided tool, always try and use something that's as close to the edge of the photo as possible. Just purely because it will do a much more accurate job. Okay, perfectly straight. And that is pretty much it for this room. That's the full process from taking the photo, setting up the shot, and editing. So hopefully that was of some help. Like, subscribe, all those things.